2020 has been quite the year. I think it's safe to say that each and every one of us has had quite the ride. There has been so much that happened for me that was really important to acknowledge and reflect on. And this is why I am sharing with you today 20 lessons I have learned in 2020. There will probably be some things that you have also learned that are similar to my lessons, but I chose this 20 because for me, those are the things that I really want to make sure I carry with me for years to come. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Ayn. I am an events manager that works in the publishing industry, and I love all things personal development. And today I want to talk about 20 lessons I've learned in 2020 to share with you a little bit of my journey and things that I am hoping to be able to implement with more intention in 2021. Lesson number one for me was boundaries. 2020 really has shown me how important it is to make sure that you look after yourself. Boundaries are one of those things that we often feel like can get in the way of our relationships, of like building strong friendships. I am not very good at setting boundaries for myself, and I'm always very eager to take on more work, more responsibility. I'm definitely a people pleaser, and I have really struggled in 2020 to kind of create space for myself and making sure that I had some time just for me. Getting to the end of this year, which has been quite hectic and where everyone seems to think that we are actually available 24/7, made me realize that actually setting boundaries is quite important. The power of routine. 2020 was really tricky when it comes to maintaining a good routine, at least for me. And when I look back at it, I realize how much pressure and stress I put onto the word routine. I had just come to, for some reason, think that having a good routine meant that I was going to be doing the exact same thing every single day. And actually that doesn't quite work for me. I'm someone that gets bored very easily, and I do need the flexibility to just kind of go with the flow and with the mood that I have on that day. What worked for me was having like list of things that could be part of my routine that day, but there wasn't an order and there wasn't any kind of like pressure on having to do every single one of those things every day. And that really helped me. Gratitude. Making sure that I took a moment to be grateful for what I had and for what was happening in my life really made all the difference in 2020. And this is probably one of the biggest lessons that I have learned, to trust the fact that if you can identify some small things that make your life better, you will be able to bring back a bit of positivity and light to your day. For me, for the longest time was having my coffee in the morning. And we got one of those things that make like frothy milk, and that was like my gratitude every single day for like about 6 months. Organizing your space. In 2020, another big lesson for me was understanding how important the space that you are spending your time in is. And this may come as a surprise as I'm an events manager. I'm very organized in my job, but in my personal life, I am just a little bit messy. 2020 was definitely the year that I came to appreciate the importance of spending even 5 minutes reorganizing your space at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day. And I actually made a video about my working space and my work setup, so if you want to watch it, I will leave a link in the description down below. Spending time in nature. This was a huge lesson that I learned in 2020. I have never been a very outdoorsy person. I think I didn't realize how much nature can do for your mental health and for your physical well-being as well until this year, when for a period of time we didn't have access to any kind of outdoor space. When we finally managed to actually access a park for the first time after a few months, that was just such a game changer. Toxic relationships. This was more of a journey, and it was definitely one of the biggest lessons for me, because I started to pay attention to how spending time with some people would make me feel. And I think it's important to say that we all have toxic people in our lives, and actually we probably have been the toxic people at some point. So for me, this was never about getting rid of people that I felt like, were giving me bad energy. I think it was more about realizing and putting boundaries with these people for specific times. And so I took a break from a few people, and I am sure that I'm going to be able to kind of reconnect with them next year. Done is better than perfect. This point is all about making sure that you just go for it. You're never gonna be ready for anything in life, not the good things anyway. So go for it, and then you're gonna learn along the way. working in a corporate job. This was a lesson that I only recently actually learned, and it was just the appreciation that came with having a corporate job and being employed by a company rather than being self-employed. In the past few years, there has been a lot of glamorization of what is it like to be an entrepreneur and like being a freelancer, being self-employed. There is a really difficult side to being your own boss, and this year really has made me appreciate working for a company and being able to just be looked after and have the support that my company has given us. And I just realized, wow, it isn't all that bad. Your 9 to 5 is not all that bad, even when you need to work like very long hours and you're very stressed and potentially annoyed with your colleagues. Reading for pleasure. So if you have watched my video about burnout and how books have helped me to kind of go through it, you would know that something that I've rediscovered is just the pleasure of reading. I work in book publishing, so part of my job is to be up to date with recent books. This year actually has taught me how to reconnect with books in a way that was just as a reader. There was no purpose to me picking up some of the books that I did aside from just immerse myself into a story, and that was like so magical. Intentions over goals. At the beginning of 2020, I decided that I wasn't going to set myself goals, but I was going to set myself some intentions for the year. I think what giving intentions over goals did for me was it just released some of the pressure that there is sometimes at the beginning of a year. And it was so important, especially in 2020, because the biggest lesson for me out of this was that I was able to just like amend the things that I wanted to achieve, the things that I wanted to focus on, and the things that I wanted to enjoy during the year. And I don't focus anymore on being super productive all the time, but I focus more about making sure that I live like to the fullest extent. And I do have to remind myself that literally every single time. Creativity. So creativity is something that I thought was an enemy of mine because I'm not really very good actually at creative tasks. And then obviously I started to work more on my writing. I have my blog where I share like career tips. I started my YouTube, and I realized that creativity comes in many forms, and it doesn't always have to be you painting or drawing, but it's just like whatever way you have to express yourself and your personality. This rediscovering creativity was one of the biggest lessons of 2020. Impostor syndrome. In 2020, I have learned how to deal with my imposter syndrome by making sure that I always reminded myself of my successes. So I started just to keep track of things. I started to make sure that I would really celebrate my wins, just to kind of like combat that feeling of, gosh, what am I doing? I don't really know what I'm doing. The influence of social media. Social media in 2020 was quite the experience. We all turned to like some form of social media to stay connected. The biggest lesson that I've learned is the influence that social media has on me and the kind of like feelings that social media, I guess, triggers in me. I just didn't like the way I felt once I sort of stopped scrolling. I think it can be a very powerful thing, but I also did have to wake up to the fact that it was having a negative influence on me. Resilience. This was more a reminder than a lesson that I learned. Being able to remind yourself that this too shall pass. For me, resilience is more about making sure that you remind yourself how strong you are than it is about the way you react to external factors. Cooking as therapy. I just had to kind of like remind myself of how nice it is to cook. Cooking just like gave me some time screen free. I would literally chop my finger off if I don't really focus on that, and that kind of managed me to like kind of keep me into the present moment a lot. Actual therapy. Another thing that I did in 2020 is start again to go to therapy. Now I know that this is something that if like me you come from a place where sadly people haven't quite come around to it, it can be a tough thing to talk about. This year I knew as the pandemic struck and as like everything was kind of like changing around me that I was going to need some help. What I would say is therapy is one of those things that you started thinking that is going to help your life. It doesn't quite help in the way you think it will. but it does in the long run. So 2020 has taught us to take care of ourselves and of our mental health, and there's nothing better to invest your money in than starting therapy. Investing in your health. The investments that I made in 2020 were varied, but the biggest ones that I have made were definitely ones related to my health. So it definitely feels like the time that I spend investing in my health was the time better spent in 2020. The biggest lesson for me was not to think about anything that was too complicated. So I didn't really do anything that was like groundbreaking. I literally only just like try to looking holistically at my health and actually trying to invest money and time thinking about it. The power of a good wardrobe. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I have gotten ready every single day of 2020 as if it was a normal day. For me, putting the right outfit on changes everything. This started way before 2020, but the lesson that 2020 taught me is being able to pick an outfit every single day was something that grounded me. The same way that you would do with space, I would just make sure that like my clothes would help me to get into the part that I was trying to play. There's such a good way to express who you are, but also they're a good way to remind you of like the things that you can do. Slowing down. There was very little that I wasn't doing before 2020. And in 2020, I was obviously forced, like many of us, to stop. But trust me when I say that at the very beginning of lockdown, I still very much continued with the same lifestyle that I had before. This was a lesson that I learned throughout 2020 that only now at the end of this year, I can just feel like I have understood. But the power of like literally just like slowing down and living more intentionally was the thing that I will take with me into 2021. Community. This last one is the best part of 2020 for me. What I have realized is how powerful having a strong community around you is. For me, having people that I could connect with and people that I could share my life in a sort of like unfiltered way was the biggest thing. Having a strong community around you is such an important thing, and I didn't realize how important until this year. So this is one of the top 20 lessons that I've learned this year. Make sure you surround yourself with people that will support you, that will listen to you, and that you will be empowered by, because that is going to be everything that you need to succeed and to have a good life. Thank you so much for watching. My biggest sort of goal for next year will be to like reach 1,000 subscribers. If you would like to support me in this journey, I would massively appreciate if you could subscribe and like this video and share it with anyone that might enjoy it as well.